and we search over the HR measurement search phrase, you get over 900,000 responses. Now, we all know about the internet and the fact that there's lots of things that come back in lots of searches. But in this case, this is about the measurement issue. And so what's the conclusion from the fact that we get back from such a search scorecards, summits, dashboards, data mines, data warehouses, and audits in that 900,000 responses from the Google search? In reality, we have been doing a lot. There's a lot of activity. And it's not to say that we're not trying. We are, in fact, trying, as the search reflects. But we still don't have the seat at the table. We're not in the board and senior level executive decision-making capacities. So given that these activities are ongoing, and with the nature of the outcomes, namely not the representation and our own self-assessment, I cannot help but recall Einstein's definition of insanity, which is another quote I'll leave with you, and that definition is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So we are doing a lot, but we're not getting to that, as we all reflect, we're not getting to that senior strategic input capacity and role, which, by the way, I think is necessary. It's not that I'm here advocating that there's not a role to be had. I'm exactly the opposite. In fact, I think it's very important for learning executives and HR and human resource executives to be a part of the strategic decision making, as we'll see from some data in a moment. Or another way to look at this objectively is to conclude that whatever we have been doing to get these seats at the table simply has not worked. Third piece of data, and that is that the vast number of CEOs think that human capital, and that's a phrase that I use to reflect this notion of an asset base, something of value into the future, that human capital and the development of those resources are critical to the future success of all of our organizations. I do believe that. I think it is critical upon us to get the influence in those strategic decisions because they are at the heart of some of the things all of our organizations are dealing with. CEO surveys confirm this conclusion. Last week I was in Chicago and spoke to a group of about the same size, maybe about 100 people. And on that panel was the vice president of Heidrichs and Struggles. This is a vice president that's been chartered with a new position for Heidrichs and Struggles. Heidrichs and Struggles is probably the most famous senior executive search firm in the nation. They're one of the original search firms for finding CEOs. They have lots of links into the C-suite of many, many, many corporations. Interestingly enough, one of the things Heidrichs and Struggles is doing is redefining their business model. So that in 5 years, 40% of what they're doing is to fill the gap on the talent side of organizations, not simply the recruiting. That's the development side, which we all do in this room. The moderator, then vice president for Heidrichs and Struggles, and this was revealing for me too, because in our current news blasting, it's like nothing else is going on except our financial institutions. His observation in their interface, Heidrichs and Struggles interface with CEOs, is that it is still, the talent issue is still, if not number one, what he said was 1A, on the minds of CEOs of our organizations. So though we don't see it reflected in the general press because we're so focused on Citibank and Bank of America and now, of course, the infamous AIG, the fact is that what the Heidrichs and Struggles executive was reflecting is that CEOs are very concerned about the talent issue and what's on the horizon, and I'm going to share some data on that issue with you as well. So it has not disappeared off the radar scope of CEOs. It is, and I think rightfully so, a high priority. It is the priority of the near what I call mantra. When asked what do CEOs respond about their organizations, almost universally they say, our people are our most important asset. It's almost like an automatic response. Some of the discussion in the economy today is, well, how could they really believe that? They don't really believe that. They're laying people off. We get these notifications of 600,000 jobs being eliminated. I think that's true. I was an operating manager for General Electric. I worked for Jack Welch. And I will tell you that the operating priorities sometimes require you to take down the cost structure in the operations, and that's what many organizations are dealing with. So I would caution against concluding that because people are getting laid off and jobs are being eliminated, that the CEO does not believe that in fact people are the most important asset. I also believe that. I think they actually do believe it. As I say, the CEOs actually do believe this. And I want to share another piece of data about confirmation of that particular conclusion. We all know the ASTD data, the annual data, on the expenditures for training and development in the U.S. economy. Just to refresh our memory about that data, in recent years, organizations in the U.S. economy have spent north of, greater than, $130 billion a year in training and development. Now, Josh Merson has a different view of that. Josh and I have talked. Josh has a different view. He thinks that's overstated. He thinks it's only 56 billion or 60 billion, something like that. It's a big number, whatever it is. Let's just stay with the ASTD number. The good news and the bad news about the 130 billion plus is that it's no small chunk of change, especially in the face of the fact that outcomes produced by these investments are generally not measured or reported. And I can tell you from my experience at GE, if I go into Jack Welch and ask for a capital investment decision of $50 million to do equipment or buildings or new location or open a site in the Far East, and I didn't have a way to measure and calibrate the outcomes expected, I might have gotten away with it once, but the second time I went to do that, I would have been on the street. Because Jack would have said, you have no idea what you're doing. You're asking for the corporation to expend money, and you have no rationale or defense for what the results are going to produce. I would suggest this absence of accountability is both good news and bad news. We're back to the ASTD 130-some billion expenditure. On the one hand, it demonstrates support. And it is indeed, I think, probably the most compelling piece of data about the fact that CEOs do believe people are the most important asset. They are basically supporting $130-some billion of expenditure without the accountability that the rest of the organization is required to provide. On the other hand, it also allows the learning community, all of us, to continue to operate without confronting the very real necessity to measure and report. And if you look at the dynamics in the U.S. economy today, and you look at the financial institutions, and our outrage, our collective outrage, which indeed I share, about what these best and brightest on Wall Street have done to us, part of the discussion is about transparency. Transparency is about understanding what is there. What are the assets? So when you hear about banks and the whole question about the toxic assets, that's largely about transparency. We don't know how to measure what's on those balance sheets to clean up the balance sheets and get back to business. That is about reporting. It is about measurement. We can't measure what is the value of those assets. So they sit on there. They're sitting on those balance sheets. In the meantime, we're locked up. So we're back to the measure and report message, and I know it sounds kind of like a mantra. In this stage of my life, it's gotten to be kind of a passionate topic for me. The fourth fact that that I want to share with you is that there is a real crisis looming on the horizon. Though we are distracted at the moment, and I will say this is likely to go on, Warren Buffett, they interviewed Warren Buffett in Nebraska Furniture Mart in Omaha. I'm from Omaha, so he's kind of a neighbor, don't know him personally. Reflected that he thinks that we're going to come out of this. He actually thought we were going to come out of this sooner than the current forecasts are, but certainly now Bernanke is about 2010. We are momentarily, or at this window in time, probably for the next year or so, totally consumed by these financial institutional issues and challenges. But I can assure you that we're going to pass through that unless you believe we're just going to crash and burn. If you do, you ought to dig a hole out in Western Washington with some of the other folks out there and get some water and food. Because otherwise, we're going to have to function under the structures that currently exist.